So the last of our reviews today, James, you've gone and seen a very different film to the two we've been talking about, Armageddon Time, new film from James Gray.
Yes.
What's going on?
So James Gray, who most recently has directed Lost City of Z.
Lost City of Zed. Sorry to correct you,
you,
but it's only because it's British explorers in it and they talk about the City of Zed.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Ad Astra as well,
Yep.
which a film which I think James Gray films are a little bit mixed. I think critics tend to like him, but I've spoken to a lot of people who often don't connect with his films that much. I think Ad Astra was very moody and pensive. It was almost like sort of paired up with Interstellar in a lot of ways, but it had a lot of tacked on action that I think if I was to felt a little bit incongruous to what the film was trying to do. And you were like, oh yeah, those scenes happened. But I think it's very interesting to contrast that as his last film with what Armageddon Time is, which I know is made for a fraction of the budget and just is tackling something very different. So this is a coming-of-age tale set in 1980 New York, basically on the precipice of Reagan's presidency. It's a time where there's a lot of uncertainty about global politics. A lot of people are on edge. There's lots of sort of comments about nuclear war and the fact this Reagan is going to sort of send this entire country to don't remember he was an actor, so there's all sort of that like suspicion. Little do they know what's coming. And the film revolves around the Graff family, a middle-class Jewish family living, and mainly this young boy, about 11 years old, called Paul. And Paul is a troublemaker. He sort of speaks his mind. He's very gobby. He'll talk back to his mum. And in school, he just like is a troublemaker. He actually doesn't really want to engage that much in academia. And what he really wants to do is draw and become an artist. And like with a lot of immigrant families who have basically struggled for generations through oppression and through, being going through economic hardship, you get this generational divide where those who have been through a certain thing know that the system is fixed and they're Jewish, so everyone's always going to hate Jews, and the only way to sort of graduate to a higher standard of living is to go to a very good school, meet other very good people, and it's sort of this like upcoming capitalist idea of like you need to graduate to a higher class, and the only way to do it is through education. You've got Jeremy Strong and Anne Hathaway as Paul's mother and father, and you've got Anthony Hopkins who plays his grandfather, who's incredibly wise and stoic. And as I sort of said before, there is this understanding around the family that the system is fixed. It's fixed against Jews. There will always be people who don't want you here. And they're sort of... so Paul has an older brother who is at a very fancy paid private school, and Paul is at a public school. And he gets into a lot of trouble, and there's this idea that there are black kids at their school, and there's sort of different ideas about what that means to be socializing with black kids and how sort of like class-wise and the influence of that has. And in his class, Paul meets Johnny, who's played really well by Jalen Webb, and they both get into trouble together, basically annoying their teacher. And what this film essentially shows you is... ways in which prejudice functions for different people, and how both in family life, ways in which like discipline happens and how that bad, the bad behavior is interpreted, and also in the law, right? So in a way you could think, oh, this is treading quite familiar territory with, the relationship with black people and the judicial system. What this film does, which is, I really liked, I really liked this film. And I think what this film does is it tackles very well-trodden subject matter, but it does it with a really, really light touch. It never throws a really obvious idea in your face. And there's just a couple of scenes. Surprise, surprise, Anthony Hopkins is absolutely amazing in this film.
No way!
And but one of the things that happens to Paul is that he realizes that his friend is being treated very differently. And when he eventually sort of moves around with a different circle of friends, he notices that some of the friends start using the N-word, and he gets a little bit confused as to why this is happening. And he goes to his grandpa. It's like, I feel really weird because my friends, some of my people I've met are actually really unkind to black people. And Anthony Hopkins is able to tell him, oh no, you should stand up for those people. But what he does is he is someone who in the 1980s was old enough to have lived through the Holocaust and also the what it would have been like to be Jewish moving to a new country, right? So, and this is all very much like implied understanding from the audience. You get this sense that Anthony Hopkins' character probably isn't able to emotionally articulate what has happened, but also cannot describe the true horrors of what's likely happened to a young child. But through his dialogue and through the wonderful performance of Anthony Hopkins, he's able to sort of demonstrate that tell a little bit about what it was like to go through that period without directly telling you what happened to Jewish people in that period. And it just leaves an audience member knowing what he's trying to communicate and also relate it to a sort of more modern racism that's happening to black people. And I just thought that there was just something about that disciplined and stripped back way of dealing with those two things in the eyes of a child without sort of introducing them to something that we already know happened. I thought was just absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic.
And it basically addresses very heavy subject matter with a very light touch, and it just leaves that raw performance and your own emotions that you take in with you room to breathe. Fantastic. And that is what I think it does well. I could very easily have eye rolled. But its emotional punches are sort of left with me and not necessarily like with the performance. That's why it's good.
You're the second person this week who could tell me that it's very good. You know, and also the thing is, like, I've been wanting to see it. It's kind of passed me by, actually, and I think it's one of those classic films that it just isn't getting a lot of airtime, isn't getting a lot of attention.
No. It got nominated for the Palme d'Or in Cannes.
Oh, really? And do you think Anthony Hopkins, best supporting actor?
Anthony Hopkins, I mean, he's really good in this. But like, shocking, he's good in everything.
I do find James Gray very interesting. I've only seen Ad Astra and Lost City of Z, which is why I was able to just say that thing earlier. Lost City of Z is one of those things that you watch this film, which has got a very sort of, you think you can plot the story, and it feels conventional, but it's not. It tells it in such a different way, and it's got this very weird hook. And it's like, same with Ad Astra, that could be quite conventional, but with both those films, you think, and I guess what you're saying, it's like, I thought I'd be getting this film, but I kind of am still, but I'm getting his way of telling me this, and I'm glad I'm getting a very unique perspective coming through, and it's nice to have that from a director. Do you know what I'm saying?
100%. Like it feels to me like a personal story. I'd actually be interested to check if it's something that is based on.
I think it might be Samuel's biography,
right?
Sure,
which really makes sense. And I think Jeremy Strong is excellent in this. He's a really sort of difficult and flawed character that never
played one of those before.
Completely different from what you've seen him in Succession. Doing something completely different. He does something completely different than what I've seen him before, and it sort of presents this idea that even though you're presented with people who are good, who have also suffered hardship, a lot of the time when things are really tough, people will probably just take the advantages that they can and look out for their own. And I think that's quite an unexplored idea. And I just think it's not obviously throwing its idea in your face, and I think you'll go in with your own emotions and feelings towards that subject matter, and I think it's very personal for different people. I mean, I was like raised Jewish, so maybe I have like a very different connection to it, but I'd love to hear what other people think. I'm very keen to have you see it and just to discuss some of the ideas, and just like Anthony Hopkins' performance, which is just brilliant. He only has about 4 scenes, but they're all just like perfect. So I'd love to hear what other people thought of Armageddon time. I was speaking to a friend at the pub yesterday, and I just for some reason was calling it Apocalypse Time. What is the film I saw? It's not Apocalypse Now.
No, it's Armageddon time. It's like it's from our game, the Antonin's game, whatever.
Armageddon time.
Great.
So let us know if you had any thoughts. You can write into hello@popkitchenpodcast.com, and we'd love to hear your impressions of that film as well.